Hey there, I'm Gabrielle Bricky, artist and educator, and today I'm going to show you how I like to sketch my characters in PROCREATE. This process coming up is pulled from my class Digital Illustration, Coloring Female Characters in PROCREATE. I have a process for sketching characters that I think will make you feel less intimidated when approaching the blank canvas, so I hope you find this useful to see. Feel welcome to practice and sketch along with me. And be sure to download my free PROCREATE brush set since you'll get the exact brush I'm using here when you do. All right, grab your iPad and jump into PROCREATE. Let's get started. So the first thing we need to do before we begin sketching is create a canvas. So I'm going to press this little plus icon in the corner here, and then I'm going to press this little icon right here. Now we can create our own custom canvas. So I typically like to do a 5,000 pixel by 3,500 pixel canvas. This is nice and high quality and can also easily fit my reference photo. I like to keep the DPI at 300, and we can see this size canvas can have a maximum of 34 layers, which will work well enough for our purposes here. Now for color profile, I like to have this sRGB profile selected because it works well for the internet. These other two categories, time-lapse settings and canvas properties, will come down to your personal preference, so I'll leave those as they are for now, and press Create. And a new canvas is created. I think ball-jointed dolls work great as references for characters. So for anyone wondering, this is the Mari doll from ipplehouse.com. For my main step-by-step demo, I'll be using this image. So let's place the reference image on our canvas. We're going to press the wrench icon here, and under Add, press Insert a Photo. You'll get access to over 900 doll reference photos when you join these courses. Now I'm just grabbing my reference, and then under Snapping, I turn Magnetics and Snapping on, so that when I scale my image, her proportions won't get wonky. So now unzooming, I grab the transform tool to move the image around and cut off some of these edges that I don't need. I want to leave as much room as I can for my drawing. So now I add a new layer, and I grab my Willow Charcoal Streamline brush so I can start sketching. I start off by warming up with a couple circular motions with my hand and arm. You'll notice how my whole arm is moving, not just my hand. Don't choke up in this beginning stage and draw too tightly with only your hand. Right now I'm thinking about drawing the ball of the head with a jaw hanging off. And then I attach this little ear to it. Now I draw an arced center line down the face and a horizontal line across where about the eyes will go. Now I draw the cylindrical shape of the neck and the basic shape of her shoulders and neckline. Now I go in and start to think about the shape of this hair and what I want that to be. I actually quite like this hairstyle here, so I'm thinking I'm going to go with something similar to what's in the photo. So I just try to look at these rhythmic lines that are happening. I'm not copying them exactly, but just trying to capture the essence of the hairstyle. Looking at C-curves to help me capture the flow. Now I'm going to go in with the basic shapes of the eyes. And I want to mention real quick, because I think it's so important for your mentality when you're starting your character sketches. Give yourself full permission to make this first pass messy. Make it ugly even. As we move forward with the drawing, we'll be able to refine more and more with each pass. But for this first pass, go wild and take the pressure off yourself as you plan and experiment with your design. So now I'm going in with a simple place marker for the nose and a simple shape for the mouth. There are lots of simple shapes you can use for these features, like circles or an upside-down triangle for a nose, or something like an oval or even a smushed hexagon shape for the lips. Be sure to check out my character drawing courses to go much more in depth with that. So now I'm still deciding what kind of look she'll have. So I'm playing with the shape of the mouth a little bit, experimenting with a little smile. I was wondering if maybe she'd have closed eyes, but I decide to make her eyes open as I put in the circular shapes for the irises. I know I don't want this piece of hair to completely cover her eye, so I erase a bit of that out. I'm not worried about perfect line art at this point, so I don't mind it being messy as I experiment. Now I'm trying to define the shape of how I want her jaw and chin to look. No need to copy the image exactly. You can always take artistic liberties where you wish. Now I'm playing with the design of the hair a little more. I'm lowering the shoulder down a little now and drawing some hatch lines to help push that area back in space into the shadows. And I typically like a V-shaped shirt line, so I add an indication of that here. Now I'm just playing with that hair, trying to figure out the design. You can see I jump around from one thing to the next, working on the whole piece and bringing it all up together. Now I color in these irises and add a tone to the lips. I'm not sure I'll keep the flowers in at this point, but for now I indicate them with an oval shape. And now I'm just working on this hair, and I'm using this reference and my imagination to come up with the design. If you'd like to find great references for hairstyles, Pinterest is an excellent place to get inspired for lots of different looks. Now heading back to the nose here, and the lips. And now I'm zooming in to add a couple lashes for the eyes, to get a feel for the look. Now I'm going to grab the eraser tool to bring back some of the whites of the eyes. Something important to note when you're making line art is don't use white paint to make corrections to your line art. Instead, use the eraser. Or else down the line when you start to color, you'll have random patches of white showing up. So remember to use the eraser tool to erase and correct things. I'm just continuing to jump around the piece now, bouncing around from features to hair. I'm going back and forth between the Willow Charcoal Streamline brush and the eraser brush, which is also set to be Willow Charcoal Streamline. So I think a little piece of hair cutting out right here could be cool to break up that space. So I add that there. Everything's still really messy as I plan out my composition. And I will note I made several different sketches of different characters before settling in on this one being my demo I'd show you guys. So I'd encourage you to do the same thing. Make a few rough sketches like this from different references with different poses and designs, and then pick your favorite. Just experimenting now, adding in some lower lashes. Sometimes I'll add the lower lashes in, and sometimes I'll leave them out. Just depends on the character. Just more work on the hair now, as I try to decide on how this hair will wrap around her head in a rhythmic way. So now I go to Adjustments, Liquify, and I just want to scooch around some stuff a bit to see if I like the look better. And I'm just using the push mode here. Just going to rework the design of the shirt here a bit. And now this first pass of the character is complete. I got the basic pose and idea out on the canvas. So go ahead now and make a few messy sketches like this. Or if you're sketching along with me, join me in the next step where we'll make a second pass on this and refine the sketch a little more. Okay, so now we're going to make a second pass on this and refine our idea a bit more. So first, I'm just going to move this down a bit. And then I want to make sure the line art is nice and high quality. So here under Actions, Canvas, I press Crop and Resize. And I just make the canvas a bit larger. Then in Layers, I select both, tap the transform arrow, and pull the corner out to enlarge. But as you can see, it made the proportions wonky, so make sure Uniform is selected for any scaling. Now I tap to just select the sketch layer, and I scooch it over just a bit more. And now that everything is how I like it, I lower the opacity down. Now I add a new layer, and we're ready to begin on the second pass. So now that my idea is in place, I'm going to get a little cleaner now. I'm going to slow down a little and think about the shapes of each feature. So I like to think of eyes like pumpkin seed shapes. Spend time practicing these basic shapes over and over again if you're not comfortable. With time and practice, drawing eyes will become more natural to you. And now I'm drawing these circular iris shapes. And I like the idea of her looking towards us, so I go with that. And now I'm just drawing some little eyelashes. Eyelashes will tend to be triangular in shape. And now I'm just hinting at upper lids with a couple rounded lines. Now I'm doing a few quick strokes for the brows. And then I head to the nose to put in 2 nostrils and a rounded curve for the ball of the nose. Now at the corners of the mouth, I put 2 dots and a little dot in the middle where the lips part. And then I lightly draw an arcing line to define the top and a soft C curve just at the bottom. Zooming in, I'm working to define the cheekbone and chin structure. And I flip my piece and continue on that. I flip my piece for a lot of reasons. One reason is just because I draw lines better when I'm going a certain direction with my stroke, and another reason is to get a fresh eye on the piece. So you'll see me flip my canvas and unzoom a lot while I work, and that's just to give my eye a fresh perspective. If you want to program your Modify button to pull up the quick menu too, just go to Actions, Prefs, Gesture Controls. And then with quick menu selected, set the Tap Modify button on. So back to the drawing now, I'm just continuing to refine these features. And if you have any trouble figuring out how to draw your line art, definitely check out my previous class where I share tons of worksheets and guides to help you through learning how to sketch. Now I'm just drawing this C-shaped ear here, and now I'm drawing the curves of the neck. So now I'm giving some attention to this hair. And you can see when I draw, I use multiple strokes to express one idea. I work at a steady pace, not drawing too slowly or cautiously. When drawing hair, think in terms of flowing S-curves and C-curves. Think big shapes. Don't get lost in the details, drawing a ton of lines and making the hair look like a haystack. Hair is a great place to be rhythmic. These lines, pulling in and out, will work well compositionally to bring your viewer's eye continuously back to the face, which is our focal point. With hair, you'll also want to change up the weight of your lines. So in some areas, use bolder, darker lines, and in other places, use thinner, lighter lines. This variety is pleasing to your viewer's eye and will help encourage the flow of the hair as well. When I'm drawing hair, I typically use a bolder line quality to express the contours of large shapes. And then the hairs inside those larger shapes will be like supporting rolls, so much lighter and thinner in line quality. Drawing hair includes lots of trial and error for me. I like to try out different lines until I find one that just looks right. So now I'm going back to my original sketch because I want to erase some of these distracting lines here. So once you've made your second pass, whatever isn't enhancing your piece from your first pass, go ahead and erase. I definitely do like to keep a little of each pass showing through though, because I think it helps the sketch look more lively and not too tight. So don't erase everything. So back on the layer I'm currently working on, I just want to see if I can draw some of these edges a little bit better. All of this planning of the hair will help me in the next phase when I really want to lock these shapes down with clean line art. So a lot of this is drawing a stroke, observing to see if it works, and going from there. So now I'm adding a new layer because I want to experiment with adding some flowers. Just something simple compositionally to add a little bit of interest to our character. Now I'm going back to this layer to see if I can fix the hair here. I'm not sure that I like that though, so I undo. You'll notice I use the 2-finger tap gesture all the time to undo. Once you start incorporating some PROCREATE gestures into your process, they'll become second nature. So now I decide to add a new layer instead to see if I can fix that hair. And I'm going back to the flower layer and I decide I want to move it. So I grab the selection tool and select it with a freehand selection, grab the transform arrow, and move it down. And this is where I'll call it for the second pass. So now I'm going to screencast this final pass of the drawing, so I can get a little more comfortable and get a little closer to my screen. When I draw, I typically don't work at a desk. I'm usually on something more like a comfortable couch. So opening up my layers here, I just pinch my fingers together to merge all of those layers. And then I press the N to lower the opacity. Then I actually grab for the Willow Charcoal Streamline Eraser Brush, and I just want to clean up some of these unnecessary lines before I get started. So here around the neck and on the hair. Now I'm going to add a new layer to get started on this cleaned up version of the line art. So I grab my Willow Charcoal Streamline brush and I zoom in to get started on the eyes. And so you're not sitting here all day, I've sped the process up a bit. But at this point in my process, I'm being more careful with the drawing. Not overly cautious, but now I'm trying to make cleaner lines and more conscious decisions. So I'm slowing down a bit. Now I'm adding a bit of a darker tone to the brows. It's a little too much though, so I knock it down a bit with the eraser. Now zooming in, I work to define the nose a bit more, drawing dark shapes for the nostrils and lighter curved lines to describe the ball and wings of the nose. Now I darken some of the important parts of these lips, so the center, the 2 corners, and the top. Now I'm adding some eyelashes. Now I'm coloring in that top lip just a bit more. And I'm going back to this layer below to erase out where the hair covers this part of the eye. Now back to my refining layer, I add a darker tone to the top lip. I like to do this because it starts to give the idea of the lighting. So now I'm defining the edge of the face a bit more and moving into the hair. So as I work on the hair, you'll see a lot of putting lines in and taking them back out. And that's just the nature of drawing hair for me. It's a lot of trial and error, as I mentioned, until the lines are just right. Now I'm defining the forehead and the cheek a little bit, and the edge of the neck. Just a bit more work on this hair now. And I go ahead to my layers and I just merge that down for now. So now I grab my eraser brush and I just erase out some of this hair lightly. I'm getting there with the flow of the shapes, but I want to try and draw them again with a bit more confidence in the design. I'm just working to really map out how this hair is flowing down. So now I lower the opacity of that layer and I merge it down. Now I go to Adjustments, Liquify, because I want to push these big clumps of hair around a bit to make them look a little more balanced on either side. Then back with my Willow Charcoal Streamline brush, I work to define the hair a bit more, and the neckline. Now I add a tone for the irises, and I add a new layer, put it below that layer, lower the opacity, and just draw a tone on for the lips. Now I add a new layer, and I zoom in and add some eyelashes. Now that I'm happy with all those layers, I merge them down to simplify. So now I add a new layer, and I zoom in to define the chin. And then I add a little oval on her nose to indicate a highlight. And then I zoom in, and I use the eraser to just soften it up. Now I add a new layer, and I want to experiment with adding a couple leaves to these flowers. Flipping my canvas, I also add on a few lower lashes. And I lower the opacity to lighten them a bit. Now that I'm happy with all that, I go ahead and merge it down. Whenever I'm happy with something in the sketch phase, I tend to just merge the layers. So now I go to Adjustments, Liquify, and I want to see if I can scooch her eye up a bit. And I like the look of that. And now I'm taking the selection tool because I'm thinking this eye needs to be scooched over a little closer to the other eye. And now I'm just coloring in and fixing that gap with my brush. So now with the eraser brush, I realize that this line in the hair needs to be softened. So I softly erase some of that out. And I add a new layer to just add a couple more lines in the hair here. And I merge that down. So I find I'm happy with the face, but the hair needs a lot of cleaning up. So I take the selection tool and I select the face and neck. Then I swipe down with 3 fingers and press Cut and Paste. This pastes the face and neck on its own new layer. To program this 3-finger swipe, head to your gesture controls. Then I go to what's now just the hair layer and I lower the opacity down. We're going to clean up this hair once and for all. But before we do that, I just want to clean up some of the edges of the face layer with the eraser. So I do that real quick. Now I add a new layer, and I start to draw the final line work for the hair. Hair is definitely a process that takes some time. When drawing hair, I put harder pressure down on my pencil to get that line thicker, and lighter pressure on my pencil to get the line thinner. This offers some nice variety. And then, like I was mentioning earlier, the outline of the bigger shapes will typically have a darker and thicker line quality, and I'll put thinner lines on the inside of those shapes, which will work to encourage and support the flow of the bigger shapes. I don't get too wild with a bunch of thin lines, though. I definitely like to keep it simple. For my style, I typically find simplicity works best. If you'd like to see more demonstrations on different types of hair, check out my class Character Illustration, Drawing Female Portraits in PROCREATE. In that class, I walk through approaches you can take to drawing different hair types. You'll find that most hairstyles come down to drawing S-curves and C-curves though, so get very comfortable drawing that type of line. Now I'm experimenting with drawing a couple smaller chunks that break away from the larger masses. I think these work well compositionally to add a little bit of fun to the hairstyle. So now on a new layer, I'm redrawing the flowers. I want to keep these simple, nothing too intricate, but just a little element to add some interest. So now I go back to the hair layer and I erase the part we no longer need because the flower's there now. And still on that hair layer, I add a few more details to the hair. Now on a new layer, I want to experiment with a flyaway hair to balance this one out. Heading back to the main hair layer, I erase these couple of lines. And heading back to my top layer, I try to redraw those hairs better. Basically, if I'm experimenting with an idea, I'll do it on its own separate layer. But then once I'm happy with it, I'll merge it down. So I'm feeling good about this sketch now, so I'm going to merge all those layers together by pinching, so it'll be one complete line art. That's a wrap on this one. If you're interested in learning more with me, check out the links in the description below. I would love to see you in class and guide you through sketching and coloring your very own female characters. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.